Well, mate, I'm actually really excited for today. Thank you for joining us, Mark, for round two. We're chatting off air about a bit about what we'd like to achieve from the podcast today. And I know personally, I'm on a journey to seek truth about life, what we can achieve, what's possible, push the boundaries. And you're somebody who's inspired me on my journey. And I'd love to create an authentic conversation today where we can hopefully inspire others. One part of being an entrepreneur and trying to achieve our life by design is that we've got to take into account, you know, factors that that aren't discussed regularly, such as how do we build wealth? Yeah. How do we create a high income? How do we then reinvest that into income producing assets? How do we build a network on a global scale? So yeah, we've got money, but then how do we still live a life where we can do cool shit, go to the safari, go play tennis in Switzerland, like whatever it may be. And I think you're somebody that's actually walked the walk in Australia who can give a lot of insights into that. And I'd love to just chew the fat about a few different topics today about how we can improve the quality of our life through talking about commerce and business and just see where it goes, mate. So I really appreciate you joining for a second time. The first podcast had awesome feedback and just want to see where it goes, mate, and hopefully inspire, like I said, the audience.
Welcome.
So, mate, the first place I'd like to start is this podcast is here today from COVID happening, and I actually watched some of your online training. It was a time in my life where I'd started doing Tony Robbins. I did one of his Date with Destiny virtually and your course. And one thing that stood out to me was how you set goals and how you visualize the future. And I remember getting so inspired from your training that I went and built a vision wall in my room.
Nice.
This whole wall was covered in images of what I'd like to achieve.
I've seen it. It's great.
Like just from top to bottom. And my thoughts on what I could achieve, at that point, there was no ceiling to what was on that wall. Yeah. Fucking billionaire, podcast, Joe Rogan. And it's funny looking back now to where I am today, and we've got one of the biggest Australian real estate podcast. And it all stemmed from that inspiration where I built this thing on my wall.
That's great news. I'm really happy for you.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, mate.
So I just wanted to say thank you first and foremost. But the reason I share that story is I'd love for you to talk about how you set goals, how you visualize, and how that can be tied in for us creating success for ourselves.
Well, firstly, I'd have to say that it's an imperative. You know, there's a book that says, "With a man without a vision will perish." I was very fortunate when I started business, my very early 20s. I dated a girl and her parents were very successful. And strangely, I didn't sort of catch on, but they were all about this having a vision and, you know, making your life count and whatever. And it all seemed a little bit kind of weird to me initially. But looking at the way they lived, they weren't just successful, they were actually madly in love as parents. And that was a great example of, okay, I can have it all. And her father encouraged me to sort of be very specific. You know, you're a chippy, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't have the answers to that question, I don't know. But he'd prod me, he'd poke me, he'd push me. And I think what spawned out of that was just, how do I get granular about this? If it's worked for him, I guess it'll work for me. And I just took it upon myself to do exactly that. I started, you know, sort of taking imagery and just putting it on the wall, as you said, gluing it to a scrapbook back then, but being very clear. And then generally, I would take time on a Sunday afternoon and just visualize that. I'd sit, you know, at home, most Sunday afternoons actually, and just play those videos in my head of what it would be like to be on a boat, to be free, independent, to have, you know, significant money in the bank, you know, have a holiday house overseas and have those sort of choices. And it just became real, more and more real. The more I pushed in, the more specific it became. And it just sort of felt to me like it was one way of charging the batteries, you know, when I was running hard. And this was 22, 23 years of age. They were sort of, you know, 80, 90-hour weeks. It was not unusual. And that's no throwaway of words. That was, you know, some weeks were 100. Easy. And that went on for years. But it's a great way of filling up and asking myself, what's this about? What's all this in aid of? You know, the pressures, you know, building a business, bootlegging it, not having any capital. It was all my energies. It was all my man hours You did everything. And what was, I suppose I had to have something in front of me.
Do you mind me asking, when you're going through that period of working 16, 18-hour days and 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, those vision boards that you had, the visualizations that you had in your mind, do you think those were the main reasons that kept the fire going and kept you on track? Or were there other factors that helped with that too? Because that's not easy.
That's a great question. I would say the majority of that cause would have been, having a focus, a centerpiece on the horizon. But you've got to understand too that my home, when I was a kid, there was an enormous amount of tension around money. So those two coupled together, I would say, was the impetus to make it happen. But you had a very, very violent, very toxic, very made arguments all the time, fists through the walls, all that, about the shortage of money. Bills on the fridge. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. And I think I took it upon myself at a young age to go, I'll fix this. Fuck it. I'm never going to live like this. And I think just having that point on the horizon then made it all sensible. It made it all logical. If I can believe and ply into that vision, I will arrive. I'm not scared of hard work. Makes sense?
I can relate to that from my perspective. Growing up in a single parent household, it's like mum would be freaking out if somebody came over and took a piece of fruit. So it creates this like you're pulled towards what you want to achieve, but you're also pushed by this drive to just, I'm getting it done.
That's exactly what it was.
When we make this vision board, how do we then take the vision and the dream and bring it back into reality to start achieving?
Very good questions, my friend. I guess you start to break that down into bite-sized pieces. You look at your current earnings of the day and you say, well, if I'm earning, back then I might have been earning, I don't know, 22, 23 bucks an hour as a chippy. How do I make 50? How do I make 60? And if you're looking at your business per se, if I'm turning over 8, 9, 13,000 a month, how do I make that 18, 19, 23, 25? It's always sort of, making those steps ahead, I suppose, drawing that vision in and saying, how can I be more? How can I be better? And then I suppose comes with that the skills. It comes with that, the abilities. It comes with that winning that next big contract, job, project, whatever. They're bite-sized pieces that you feel that you can attain at that point. That's how I would break it down.
Touching back on visualization, it's something you hear online and, you've seen Conor McGregor, I visualize hitting him in this way.
Yes.
You're one of the only people you're the only person we've podcasted with that has spoken about properly visualizing. And can you go a bit more in depth into that visualization process? I know you spoke about it doing it on a Sunday, but what's it like? Is it a 30-minute visualization? How does it happen? Can we go a bit more into depth about it?
Yeah, sure. They're really great questions, by the way. No one's ever asked me that. It's sort of playing that video piece in your head, drawing out what are the particulars. I'll give you an example. I was obsessed as, an early budding business owner. I wanted to make a mark. I wanted to feel like I was making progress. And one of those simple things was, I want to buy a new car. Let's break it down. I want to buy a new car. It's going to be silver. And then I started working beside a guy. I was flicking him deals, townhouse deals and mini storage developments and stuff. And he rolled up one day in a new silver Porsche. Now, he was 15 years older than me. I'm like, that's the car. Got it. And then one day, strangely, he says to me, let's go check out this site. Come with me. And we sat in this car. And I'm like, okay, this is me. I'm sold. So how do you visualize that is you take the time, you play it out in your head. What's the upholstery? What does it smell like? What am I wearing? Where am I going? Who's with me? Who am I taking with me, metaphorically? Who's going to benefit from my success? Who do I get to be?
Who do I get to be?
They were the questions, yeah.
What was the most recent one you've done as an adult?
That's a great question too. I realised after my divorce that it was that things had to start all over again. You know, it wasn't financially, it was about me. It was a rebuild, complete rebuild. You know, that by and large, that was the hardest thing I think I've been through other than losing a child. So I realised then, you know, I was wandering aimlessly for months and months after my divorce had settled. I should have been stoked, happy, ready to move on, and I just wasn't. There was just this hollowness and this, it was just a compass with no needle. I had no fucking clue. And I realised, it started to occur to me over time, like, between the drinking and all that nonsense, I really need to get back to basics. What are the roots? What got me here? I get to do this again. What a gift. So I got serious. I just pulled out a piece of paper one day and said, okay, if this is round 2, I get to design this exactly how I wish. And I just put pen to paper, man, and just let it talk. It took weeks, but it just started to formulate. I'm like, okay, how does love look again? How does life look again? How does family look again? How does money look? How does wealth, affluence, how does progress look and feel at this point going forward? It was a complete rebuild, grassroots up.
How does it look?
It looks good. Yeah, I mean, it depends, you know, how you design it. You know, if you're going to consciously scribe out and sculpt how your life is to be, you get to make it as astonishing as you wish, right?
What was the biggest change in you as a character between now and then? What
You're
needed to
talking
change?
way back then?
Yeah, so
20s?
between pre-divorce, Mark,
Oh, yeah.
post-divorce, Mark, what needed to change in your life to improve the quality of man you are today?
Yeah. I need to take ownership of the things that I'd failed at. It's very easy to blame, particularly in divorce. There's children involved and emotions are high. But it takes a real man to step back and say, what did I cause of this? When you're able to own that, then you're able to reestablish and move on. And that's when you're healed. There's too many of us walking around wounded.
Fucking heaps, isn't there?
Carrying the past. Oh my word. We've all got wounds. Do you want them to heal? Well, look in the mirror and ask the deeper questions, you know. And be prepared to change. A lot of people run around saying, I'm doing the fucking work. What does that mean? I'm not being harsh. I just don't get that. I'm not advertising it. I just do it in my own quiet time. I know what I need to change. I need to follow through and execute. Lip service doesn't cut it. Yeah.
I'm going to be a bit vulnerable here. I've made some mistakes in the past and of recent too. And it's something where I think for the very first time I'm going through that rebuilding process properly, and speaking to people, proper people, multiple times a week, and going through that rebuilding process myself. Now, last time we had a podcast, there was a reel that we actually posted a couple of times because it went quite viral. It was about me asking about my friend group. If you don't remember, I asked you, I said about the friend group, you know, what do you do? And, you know, obviously not having those friends.
I recall it.
Yes. I ended up cutting majority of that group out. Now, I've also had some situations where I'm now cutting the rest of the group out, funnily enough, as of yesterday. Now, I've also made some other, not in terms of bad business decisions, that have affected people close to me. And I'm in that rebuild, and it's not the fact that I meant to be that way to certain people, but I found out some stuff about myself through seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist that have actually affected the past 13, 14 years of my life, and I had no idea. Now, this is for the very first time I'm going through this rebuilding process. Like I said, you know how you said lip service? Yeah. I had lip service a lot. I said, yeah, I'm going to change. Yeah, I'm going to change. But I never did. I feel like this is the very first time where I've actually taken action. What's your advice for me going through this process? Because I know it's not going to be a short process. It's probably been 4, 5, 6 weeks now. And it's every week it gets deeper and deeper. And I'm finding more and more. And it's uncovering 14 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years of just stuff. What's your advice for me?
Well, without attempting to delve into something too personal, I guess my only response would be, you only get given what you can cope and handle. There is a universal law that states that you don't get something you're going to die from. You have the ability to cope, manage, and then foster a different way of being. So I think to believe in the challenges or whatever lays ahead, that you have the resource, that you have the ability to endure, grow, and be better, prosper. That's what I would say, is just having belief in yourself. If you're willing to go there, well, the answers will be there too. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
It's not complex. You know, I admire you being so audacious, but there's nothing that you and I can't resolve. You know, you and I are deep souls. We're built the right way. I think we live in a world of fragility and you know, cotton wool. I think there's a lot more to us than we actually give ourselves credit for.
What did you do on the days when you were rebuilding yourself and it was a bad day for you? It's not a good day. You're not enjoying it. You're having a
There was lots of them. There was lots of those. I think men do it well when we become solo. We're different. We are wired different. All this, you know, noise and commentary and dialogue about, you know, equality. Yeah, we might be equal. We're nothing alike. I think men do it best in our own quiet time. We don't communicate. We talk to ourselves. We go to a place, it can be dark, it can be whatever it might be. But I remember going to the gym here at the house and just, mate, almost fucking breaking myself every day. And that somehow felt like peace. To lay in bed at night being so fucking sore and so tired, so exhausted, but also mentally. That was the place that felt the best.
I appreciate that.
It's not drugs, it's not even friends, it's not booze, it's not even your close mates. It's like, I need to fucking solve this.
For everyone out there that is listening, that what Mark just explained is exactly what my psychologist told me to do on day one, and that's what I've been doing. And they're dark places. I think my next question for you is, even though you're alone in those dark spaces, when you come out, when you're reaching out to the people around you, and you might not be in the right energy state, how do you make sure that you don't negatively affect the other people in your life while you're rebuilding?
Don't tell them.
What if they know?
Don't tell them. I don't see the point in vocalizing those things. That's an internal reset. You know, it's not like I need to tell the world and, you know, make it known. I wouldn't be vocal at all about it.
So you wouldn't even put it on the podcast?
No.
Cut this part out?
Oh, it's up to you.
No, keep it as authentic for the audience.
Oh, indeed, I would, but I wouldn't go telling your friends that this is what's going on. I wouldn't. That's
Gotcha.
I'm just not wired that way, and I don't think most men are.
No, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
What, from your perspective, Mark, when you hit the reset button where you can start seeing forward and gaining clarity, what are, on the rebuild, what are the most important parts? Like, what are the first couple of steps? Is it to sort your finances out? Is it to rekindle relationships? Is it to get more connected with yourself? Like, what were because you've got success on multiple facets now, and I'm curious from my age, what's giving you the greatest quality of life and fulfillment? And what order should we be prioritizing?
I'm not sure there's an actual order to any of that. You know, life doesn't work in a linear fashion. It's quite dislocated and disjointed, right? So what were the steps? Well, sure. I would probably say the relationships are very important. To go, to maybe rekindle, maybe even sort of, bathe in some close friendships. Money is going to be an important one. If it's a rebuild, probably there are some financial pressures. For me, off the back of a divorce, it was significant. There was $300,000 a month of lawyers' fees.
Jesus.
And that rallied for 22 months.
What?
Yeah, $300 a month, yeah. So there were some financial things that I needed to address, They were real. It was like, okay, head down. Let's get some deals together. So, and amongst that, I would definitely say that there needs to be some self-replenishment, for sure. In a strange way, although it's not the anecdote, you and I need to be very kind to ourselves in a rebuild, but it's not the case. I think we see ourselves, if we've hit that point, it's obviously a trough, it's a low point. And there's a lot of hatred for ourselves. Why the fuck am I here? How did this happen? Why now? Why me? So there's a bit of self-loathing when it really needs to be flipped, and you need to be sort of very careful that you sort of embrace yourself and be like, okay, this didn't work out the way that I wanted to, but this is a rebuild and this is my chance to get it right. You need to switch that dialogue, inner dialogue.
Inner dialogue.
Because the natural default is, I fuck this up. This is wrong, or shit's in chaos, or it's a divorce, or I'm going through something that's pretty heavy. It's my fault. It might be. But you need to stop and think, how am I going to dig myself out of this grave? It's only going to be me. If I can just be a little bit kind, a bit warm, and realise this is just a step in life that I need to learn, be a bit more, a little bit more prudent, a bit more aware of yourself, you'll get there faster.
Now that you have rebuilt yourself and you're at a stage in your life where you're comfortable, how does it feel knowing that you did go through all of that trauma, you've made it out the other side in a great position, but also not worry about it happening again?
What sort of ties into that previous point that you and I discussed? You're never given the circumstance without a resolution. You're not given the challenge without the answers. You're just not. It's up to you to discover them. So in that same vein, I feel now that, you can't be conquered. And that's not an ego speaking. It's just, I know it doesn't matter what happens. I will continue. I will fucking march. Nothing will ever have it over you. And that's a beautiful confidence in a man. That's when you and I really come into our own. I think we all need that. And I think what tends to happen is that we seem to boo-hoo, we seem to try and distract ourselves from life's challenges. We try and avoid them, go around them, detour. I think you and I should stand in the middle of the fucking highway and just take them. The older you come, the older you are, the more you start to realise they shape and forge a very different character. Bring them on. I'm fucking ready. Make sense? You can't avoid them. They're there. That's why you're here. That's why your fucking soul chose this place. True?
Very true.
Why prolong it? Let's get it done. Let's do this. I've only got a certain amount of time. How great can I be?
Do you have any goals or dreams you'd like to achieve before you pass?
Plenty.
What's the first thing that's like, what's your North Star at the moment?
That's a great question. There's a few competing. I would say, look, I want more kids.
More kids?
Yeah, I love kids, yeah.
What is it about kids?
I think they bring the best out of us as humans. Yeah, there's so much to learn from them. I love children. So I would definitely say it's expanding the family, for sure. Yeah. So I raised 2 children when I was married. They weren't my kids, but they are now. So I inherited 2. I've got one of my own. She is just an absolute delight. And then I'd definitely sign on for another 2 or 3. That's the next project. I was getting that right.
Love that.
And I think also too, coupled with that, relationships aren't easy. I mean, look, money compared to relationships for me is actually very easy. Strangely, there's a formula, there's a process, there's a mechanism by which, when you get good at a craft, you apply that, you resource it well, you step back, you build a business, then you hold the vision. Make sense? You build infrastructure around that, people, systems, processes, whatever, and then you manage that, you oversee that as best you can. Relationships aren't like that. They go in every direction you don't expect. And I want to be able to master that well. I don't think that I did a good job of that previously.
You talked about systems and process for finances and career. One thing that I want to achieve in my journey is I want to do $100 million exit off the back of building an audience from the podcast. What's your advice from doing so many deals at a high level? What's your advice for making that dream goal a reality?
So 100 mil exit.
Yep.
And in what form? What sector?
So building an audience off the back of the podcast, which we can then monetize the audience through creating. I was thinking maybe some type of education, and I know you've done that in the past. It'd be interesting to see your perspective on that. But I feel as though the business will organically arise through the process of building this audience. And I believe the audience will be built on a global scale through interviewing people. And we'll create something where it's potentially a reoccurring revenue stream with a 10x multiple, for example. Yeah, that's my thought process.
And you're asking for counsel about how you'd build that. What were the steps between here and 100 mil?
Yeah, process. What is that?
I don't know your world well enough. I typically stay in my own lane. But if I was to take a pun on the digital world, I'd say that you need to scale and you need to reach out to bigger, better minds that you can interview, that draw eyeballs, that you can then monetize quickly. So, and my only sort of comment to that is that the only way that you'll reach those types of people is that you become more. They're not going to take a phone call from you. No disrespect.
Yeah.
But as you start to add value to their lives, then they'll happily sit with you. So the question is, how fast can you grow? Really, isn't it?
Because like we look around the room now, there's so many minds of great people, and I see photos of you with Richard Branson, like all these great minds. How did you build yourself to provide? Donald Trump, Tony Robbins. How have you built yourself along the journey to network with these people?
That's a really great question. Another great question, yeah. Look, I just poured myself into books and being around people that were already where I wanted to be. I think a lot of people undervalue the company they keep. I made a point of like, I don't ever want to be a billionaire. I don't see the sense in that. That's not defeatist. I just don't see the point. If my values are sort of family, that's a very big distraction from family. That's a very big cost offset. But to be certainly comfortable and keep pushing the limits, yeah, that's what I'm about. So I said about, years ago about sort of being in the company of very wealthy people. And so it was one of the reasons I moved to the States. There wasn't that many in Australia, or not a lot back then, but Americans were very different. So I had buddies in Illinois and LA and stuff like that. And the more I got around them, the more it just seemed by osmosis it was possible, I'm sitting at a mate's house and he's like, oh, Denzel just lived down the street. Denzel Washington. I'm like, down the street. Yeah, and the next morning we're driving past his house. I'm like, it's not a fucking house, it's a hotel. Like it blew my mind. I'm like, and this guy was just hitting it. We'd walk in a casino and they knew this guy's first name. I'm like, right, this guy's solid, But he'd talk about doing deals and I'm like, fuck, I'm making 3 or 4 million a deal. This guy's making 30, 60s.
Wow.
I had to be around those types of people. And it's surprisingly how well you graft, if you're open to it, how well you can graft the details and the nuances, how they think, their psychology. It's very powerful. Very powerful.
Do you think...
You need to find, sorry, can I just close that loop? You need to find somebody that's exited for 100 million in your space and just shadow them. That's it. Good.
That changed. Nah, that was actually my next question. You just answered it. You just answered it.
You know, success leaves clues is that old saying, that old adage. And it really does. You know, I see particularly peers and even my colleagues, even my competitors now, that are on this bent where they actually want to share what they know. So there's a guy that's been a competitor for me for God knows 14, 15 years. And we actually came to throes many years ago on a project. I actually had a development. He needed access through to my development. And I knew who he was. He's a very, very wealthy guy and he's not the easiest guy to get along with. And I thought he'll have to make contact with my town planners. Eventually this guy's going to come fucking crawling. He's going to need access to the rear of my site for stormwater. Sure enough, the phone rang one day and he's really belligerent. He's upset. He's really kind of uptight. You can tell he's full of ego. And I said, oh, listen, I understand where you're at. He's like, he was being condescending, right? And I said, listen, why don't you and I just catch up for a sandwich? Let's just see the possibilities. And he's like, no, I haven't got time for that. Almost sort of saying it was too good for it, you know? And I said, no, let's just catch a sandwich. Either or, listen, it doesn't bother me too much, John. Either we can do a conversation over the telephone, which the answer is no, we can do a sandwich and I'll possibly say yes. So he's cornered and he goes, okay, fine. And now this guy's sort of, 450, 600 million sort of bracket.
Wow.
And now he almost, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to come and get some lunch? So I joke about it, I grind him. But now I glean so much from him. The way he thinks is very, very different. And when he goes into an industry, he's not just a player in real estate. When he goes into industry, he just fucking dominates. He just goes and poaches all the key people. Listen, I'll give you shares, I'll give you script, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. Come work with me. And they're like, great. And he just literally hoovers up the talent. And he smashes it. That's a different way of doing things for me. So I think it's important to understand that the company you keep, find someone that has done it and just go replicate the steps.
What were some of the changes in perspective you've gained through your mentors? Like, what are some of the success principles?
Well, in the field of that I'm in property, look, a lot of them are just bold. A lot of them are just, gutsy. They're brash, and they'll look at something and say, I think I can do that. So probably one of the simplest things I probably picked up is, you know what, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to measure that risk. I'm going to know how to manage the risk, but inevitably we're going to do this. And to bring that to the table. Inspire the team, show them how it's going to be, and hey, listen, we can pull this off. That's been the conversation for many years around my team. We're going to do this. And they just look at me like, puzzled, you sure? Yeah, absolutely. We've got what it takes. So the bigger guys, I just find there is a little bit more gutsy than most.
So when you're talking about the people that are working with you, you've created a vision board and you've created goals for yourself. Do you push your people that are working with you to do the same thing and the same habits or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Why?
They're their own people. They don't have to do what I do. They have to follow me.
Do you give them advice to do it or no? You just let
Only
them find
if they
their
ask.
own way. And they ask. Got you.
But I'd say the general consensus is that a lot of them are very different people now working with me.
Got you.
Particularly those with a long tenure.
Yeah.
Very different.
Another question coming back to the childhood piece. Yourself and Daniel, had a harder upbringing than myself. So I grew up in a middle class family and we didn't have to struggle. I'm not sure about Mr. Blackwood over here. I'm not sure if you grew up with money or not, but if you grew up with money or you grew up with some level of support in terms of financial support, and you don't ever have to worry about food or clothes or anything like that. There's, to me, a lot of people, there might not be that driver there for them for that financial push. What would your advice be to the people that actually didn't actually have to have that hardship that both you, Daniel, and maybe Spuckwood would have had?
Yeah, it's an interesting angle. You know, if you sort of felt that you're lacking the drive and that tenacity, or that, you know, the reason why to get off your ass and do something, that's a fairly easy answer. I mean, if it's not about you, make it about somebody else. It doesn't have to be, everyone has to start below zero, you know. I think it's a gift. If in your case it's different, well, then don't make it about your own needs, make it about others. And then that'll push you, because you'll do a lot more for someone else than you ever do for yourself.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a bit thankful for the fact that I got kicked out of home when I was young. I lived on a street, lived in a bus stop for a few nights and trap houses. So I ended up having that hunger through that. But before that happened, I never had that. That's why I ask, because if I didn't go through that, I'm not sure if I would have had that want to have that financial push. And I've met some people along the way that have been born with some money and they just don't care.
Yeah, there's look, I don't get a lot of wealthy families, family offices, when they sort of naturally ascribe their wealth to their kids. I don't understand that ploy.
How do you handle it with your kids? If you don't mind me
simple.
asking?
You get nothing. Absolutely zero.
Is it the same for girls as it would be for sons?
Oh, my word. Absolutely. So here's what I don't want to do, is rob my children of the future that they want. And when you give them money, it's almost like you've contaminated the idea of their own vision.
That's
You've
what I've seen.
stained the future of their life. And I have no desire to do that. This is how I chose to live, honey. Your game is your idea. Now you can learn, I'll help you. I will be there at every time. You want to save for a home? You've got it. I'll be there. You want to renovate it? I'll be on the tools with you, sweetheart. I will be there all the way as a father, as a role model. But my objective is not to give you shit. And we have this conversation frequently. This is not a one-off discussion. 5 weeks ago, we were driving to school. And the kids at school give her a hard time, Lamborghinis and McLarens and stuff like that. And we were talking about it, and I said, honey, when I say zero, that means nothing. That's not being nasty. I'm here to serve you at the best way I possibly can. She looked at the car and she goes, not even a car. And I said, no, honey, that literally means nothing. I said, but if you say to me, Dad, I'm going to save a deposit for a home, can you help me? I'd say, sure. Now, I pull her out of school on Wednesdays and she goes to our office Wednesday afternoons and works at HQ. She's in grade 5 and loves it. She just potters around, does a little thing, but I want her to adopt the idea that it's about work and me making choices. The school was not pleased at all. They threatened me about taking her out of school. We can't have her knowingly not show up every week for that same time frame. And I said, well, I'm taking her. She's my child. It's either that or homeschool. You choose. So I think that's a very dangerous avenue to take. You know, can you imagine my kids with 100 mil going, righto, 30 to you, 30 to you, 30 to you? She would be the target of all the wrong guys. Right?
I've seen that.
You've seen it. I've seen it. She's got money. You're not even with her for the right reasons. And that would be a disgusting way to end my time, right? Knowing the pain and trauma she's going to go through because he or she doesn't love her, right? That'd break my heart. But now you get to live out the full body of your life. That's a different conversation. Let's talk about that, sweetheart. What's it going to be for you? You'd be a great pianist, ballerina, I don't care. Whatever you want, honey. But it's all at your fingertips.
Because at the end of the day, really, it's not the attaining the goal that makes the change. It's who we become in the process.
It's the journey,
isn't
man.
it?
It's the journey, man.
Like, I wouldn't be where I am without having to work towards those goals.
Of course. It's never the destiny.
you've got to, let's say, so your level of wealth, Mark, you touched on a number, say, for example, 100 million. How does somebody spend that money strategically? How do we multiply? How do we invest in assets? I know that you talk a bit about AAP for investing in real estate. Do you mind sharing your perspective on?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because you asked some questions before you came. I guess for me, you know, there's a couple of motions to this. The first thing I would comment and pass on would be that you have to massively out earn your spending, particularly in this country. So if I'm spending 80, 90, 110 a year, I've got to be able to earn 180, 250. I've got to be able to push the curve, the bow wave, well outside of my spending, my expenditure. That's the first and foremost.
Would there be a rough percentage, half, double your money?
Say 50% or greater. Now, some people will be sitting there listening to your podcast going, what the fuck? It's easy for him. No, we're all started the same place. But what have I got to do? What's the side hustle? What am I doing? I don't know. But you have to start to think, how do I reduce my expenditure and massively outperform that number? Then, with that capital, you've got to ask yourself, how do I make that grow? And this was a colossal error that I made. When I first got into projects, into developments, I thought I was killing it. You know, I was making 7, 8, 9, 11 million a year. There was years where I was making 14 million a year net. This is, you know, 14, 15. That was serious money.
Still serious money.
Yeah, well, it was $1 million a month was my target, right? And that was net. That's not gross. You don't talk gross. And a mate of mine dialed me up one day and he said, listen, you know Keith Cunningham? I said, no. He goes, he's the rich dad in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I said, oh, I've read that book about 3 times. He goes, Keith is going to be at this hotel in Hawaii. I reckon you could bump into him accidentally and meet this guy. He lives in the States. I went, really? And so I jumped on a plane, blasted over to Hawaii, rolled up this hotel. The breakfast, I'm thinking, he's going to be here sooner or later. I'm waiting. He comes rolling through the door. I walk past him accidentally. Hey, is your name Keith? Right. Mate, seriously, it was that fucking bad. And he's such a gentleman. He looks at me in his Texan accent and he invites me to breakfast with his wife. And I said, look, I won't sit, but I'd just love to ask you some questions. A little bit like you, curiosity. And he said, listen, come back tomorrow. It'll just be you and me for breakfast. Is that okay, honey? And she's like, yeah, sure. I get one-on-one with this guy. Now, he's a multi-billionaire. He sold his TV channel for $361 million, like in 1982. Wow. And then he went bankrupt. And what a great guy to learn from. The peaks, the troughs, the peaks, the troughs. Multi-billions in oil, reverse mergers. The guy's got such an incredible acumen. The next day, I sit in front of Keith for 50 minutes, one-on-one. And what do you do? It's his first question. I sort of explain very briefly, okay, that's what I do. And he looks at me and he goes, gee, that's not so smart, is it? And I'm thinking, right. Okay, where's this going? He goes, that's not so smart. You're one of those guys that sells a lot of time. He starts laughing. He goes, but you're just selling it for more. I went, you're right. He goes, that don't work. I did that. You'll never be wealthy doing that stuff. And although I was making $1 million a month back then, it was very clear that you had to put energy, capital, risk, all that was being managed by your energy resource input. It was all driven by one thing, you. And I got on the plane 2 days later and I came back with about 4 pages of just notes. I'm going to do this, I'm going to research that, I'm going to investigate this. I need to discover a way of making passive cash flow real. Now back then I knew the word passive, but I didn't have enough assets to really comment broadly on the topic. And he smashed me and just said, you're just like the rest of these fucking monkeys. Wow. You're all out there selling time. You just think you're cool because it's a premium to your time. You're just making a little bit more than most.
What did you do to change from selling time to what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, that was the shift. You know, it started with a few pages of notes and I came back and I thought, right, I'm going to take the capital that I'm earning out of projects and not redeploy it into projects. I'm going to shift it sideways and I'm going to find something that makes me money and grows in the background. That's what he's telling me. That's the verse that I'm taking from Keith. So I came back to Australia 2 or 3 years later. I started to make some inquiries into, over 50s lifestyle villages, parks. And to me, it just seemed like a continuing revenue stream that grew. And then the more I looked at it, the more it made sense. And I measured it against a whole different other range of asset classes. But it just seemed to be head and shoulders above the rest. It was untapped, undiscovered, and it made sense. I could buy a park for, back then, 4 or 5 million, and it was paying me 600 grand a year net. I'm like, okay, so I own 4 hectares that I could future develop, and it's paying me 600 grand a year net, and I'm getting it for 5. I can do that. And I just started taking money out of projects and putting it into parks. And then all my buddies, colleagues, peers were like, that's just stupid. What are you doing that for? How long does it take you to do that a week? And I'm like, what do you mean? How long does it take you to oversee all that stuff each week? I said, 10, 20 hours a week. And they're like, you're fucking nuts. Why don't you just take that 12, 15 million you're earning a year, put it back into more projects and just keep scaling? I'm like, yeah, but something tells me that there's a time limit to that. There's an expiry to that. The market shifts, it downsizes, it moves against you, the tide goes out. I said, at least this way, I've got assets that are earning me money 24/7, 365. And I was going to listen to Keith before I listened to them. This guy clearly had the runs on the board. And then we just started to push hard into parks, and, they were making us serious money. And the team that I appointed just got better and better. Today you have some very intelligent women working in that business unit that are far smarter than me. And they know that stuff well. And those parks really produce now. Those parks would have to be probably in the top 10% nationally of what they earn expense to revenue net.
Wow. Guys, I hope everyone that's listening to this, I hope you all understand the message that Mark just gave. That is a quote from a multi-billionaire. That's advice. This is multi-billion-dollar advice. Just so you know, this is advice that you're getting for free off Mark Rolton. So thank you.
Yeah, Keith's an interesting guy, mate. He's one of those fellows that, again, goes back to our comment previously. When you start to move down the path, you realise, I don't need much to live. All I've got is my daughter's private school fees. That's really the only expense I have. But you start to want to share, and you're like, how can I help someone else get along that road? How can I help them get there faster? And that's Keith. He just sat there with such grace, right? And he just pulled it all apart. Just said, yeah, it makes no sense at all. You developers, you're not that intelligent. You don't keep shit. You just keep selling stuff. You're like prostituting your skills. Those are the words he's using. And, but in a graceful manner, he was absolutely right. I mean, how many people give you that kind of time? Amazing. He didn't even know that I flew from Australia. Didn't tell him. No, just said, mate, I just, just come over to Hawaii. And, but he honestly, and that strangely, I caught up with him the next day as well before I left. And he was ever so polite and just, yeah, man, great to meet you, this sort of stuff. So I think you need to be careful that you're willing to push in and ask those people, what would you do? I had a kid here 3 weeks ago. He would have been 18, 19, and he walked all up the driveway. I'm sitting on the deck looking at the beach. It's a Tuesday afternoon. He walked all up the driveway and he said, can I ask you a question? I said, now you're here. Absolutely. No one does that shit, Wow. No one does that, right? I said, what's the question? He asked it, and I told him. I said, here's what I think you need to think about. Do it this way. Walked off. But I think it'd be bold, right?
Wow.
People want to share, man. They want to share. They want to help. I think we all get that we're here to support, and try and do our best to nurture that next generation through.
How about not even the next generation? How about the people that you're with? The guy sitting down there, Mr. Blackwood. He's been with you for a while, I believe. How many years has he been with you? 6 years. 6 years. So he's been with you for a while now. What makes you decide on the people that you keep in your life?
It's a tough one. There's different elements. If you're talking professionally or personally.
Both.
Let's start professionally. I would say that a person needs to show their true colours. Are they committed, yes or no? And don't take their words as meaning anything. They'll stay the distance. They'll go the hard yards. They'll be there after hours if necessary. They'll do the miles if they're serious about supporting you in your vision. One thing that I've always been very careful to do is make sure that I remunerate people appropriately too. There's no one on an award. You know, we've had project managers over the years that have been very skilled, probably some of the most skilled in that industry, and they've actually found their way to our organisation. I heard you guys are okay. They're pretty good to work for. And I would just say to them, listen, performance-based, here's your base. It's significantly more than an award, but the token is that when you and I get DA approvals, you get X. And when we deliver those products on the ground, finished in settlements, you get Y. And there's guys running around making $500,000-600,000 a year as project managers. That's unheard of.
Wow.
Unheard of. Unheard of.
Taking applications.
But you want to incentivise them. What works best, the stick or the carrot?
Yeah.
Has projects been the most effective way to generate cash flow for you?
Absolutely. Hands down.
For somebody that's aspiring to generate some serious cash flow per annum, what would your advice be to those people when considering how to start generating cash?
It's a great question. And
Especially if you don't start with much though too.
Yeah. I would take a note out of Keith's book. Stay in your lane. There's no point someone crossing over from, I live in the medical fraternity, this is my world, this is what I do, I'm a dental technician, and then trying to have a crack at property. Stay in your lane. Stick at what you know. Get good at it. Become the best of your craft. So I wouldn't say that property's for everybody. No way. Not at all. Projects are not easy, particularly starting out. It's okay when you got cash and you can go, I'll go get that and I can make that. I can turn 30 into 60. But, starting out, those first 3 or 4 movements are somewhat difficult. Stay in your lane, get good at what you do, and then be willing to charge more for it in that process.
Just on the topic, Mark, of projects and then making some serious cash flow, I've noticed you've done some education in the past as well. Yeah. I'm curious for my own, because I'm in buyer's agency now as my prime cash flow whilst I create the dream. What's your perspective on education business for profitability?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's wildly profitable. By the time that you put down the amount of marketing required to generate eyeballs sales, it's a bit of a zero-sum game. What education did for us, I was tricked into education. Someone said, tell your story, and I rolled out, there was 700 people. It wasn't like it was designed. But what education proved worthwhile for us was deal flow. You had a lot of people running around going, listen, I just want to get out of my job. I just want to sell my business, but I can't. I need some side money. I need a side hustle. And we would train them and they'd start bringing opportunities forward. And that really caused an explosion. We were able to flick deals left and right, developers, ultimate buyers all over the place, syndicates, financiers, they're all still looking for shit, It's insatiable, that demand. So we just kept flogging more and more stuff to our developers, buyers and stuff, competition. But then we had deal flow that we would just cherry pick the best out of them. And that really sped things up for us.
So you almost used education as a form of prospecting, essentially.
Yeah. Well, they were armies, they were boots and legs on the ground finding us deals. It allowed us to scale pretty quickly.
It's really interesting.
Mark, if you were to start all over, this is a viewer question, by the way. If you were to start all over again, what would you do? How would you start it?
Well, knowing you're talking with the same skill base that I have.
Yes.
If anything, I'd just go straight into property and just develop projects at faster speed.
But if you didn't have any money?
Oh, there's always money for a good deal.
Got you.
It's never about money.
Do you think
It doesn't matter what part of commerce, enterprise or business, it's never about money.
Do you think it's possible for, let's say, a younger agent that doesn't have a lot of money, find a site, as you were mentioning, put it together, but ask for equity pieces?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if I'm an agent or I'm an agency group, you know, can I put together
Are developers open to that?
Of course. Well, particularly in this current market, it's so competitive, right? Developers will do anything to get hold of a site in the current space. So if you turn around and say, listen, don't pay me a com, give me nothing, give me equity in the deal, absolutely. I'd take that every day long. Why? There's no cash exchange. I don't pay tax on the cash I would have given you as a com. And it would translate to a pre-sale of some nature. So that's exactly what I did. You know, I was doing a lot of deals. You know, we were shifting, 400 or 500 blocks a year under option to builders all over the country from developers direct way back in the day. And I'd say to them, Tim, don't pay me a com. I'll lose half it in tax. Give me those 2 blocks of land. He'd be like, sure, absolutely. And they were debt free. I just go to the bank and say, listen, I own the block of dirt. It's worth 400. I'm going to build a house for 280. Great. Here it is. Makes sense?
Yes.
So it was sweat equity, essentially, but it puts you on the map pretty fast.
Sweat equity.
So what you could do, let's say, for example, as a hypothetical example, you look at the Gold Coast, you research the market, you find out zoning.
Let's not look at the Gold Coast.
Not look at the Gold Coast.
This place is wild.
Another place.
It is the Vegas of real estate, man.
What
Really?
market would you look at?
It's nonsensical.
If we're to talk about
People
a market,
paying telephone numbers for staff, it makes no sense at all.
what market should we touch on in terms of?
Take your pick: Sydney, Brisbane,
Okay,
Melbourne,
Sydney.
Perth.
Let's say Sydney. Let's say you have a look at a particular LGA, local government area, and you find out the zoning. Then you go around, you look around, and you're finding what houses or what blocks you can do particular things with that aren't for sale. They're not thinking of selling. You go to them, you say, propose an idea, you package it up, and then you might not know any developers, but you just Google development.
Just see who originally developed in the area.
See who originally develops it. Great idea. And just call them and say, here's a deal. Would you be interested for equity share? Do you think that's a smart play?
Absolutely.
Great.
But where you'd find those developers, you wouldn't just mysteriously go looking for them. You wouldn't just, to help you out, you wouldn't just go sort of ringing anybody. You go straight to the council town plan and look at all the DAs that have been approved. And you know who's done what, where, and how much they've paid. You'd measure that against RP data and you'd zero right into who's doing that product in that locality. And you'd run 4 or 5 of them against each other. That's how you do it.
What's your strategy in the marketplace at the moment when it comes to the projects? Is it subdivisions, splitter blocks?
Subdivisions are our focus right now. Trying to get more and more scale. You know, our land bank is extremely low. We'd like another 2,000 or 3,000 blocks in our land bank, yeah. I mean, look, the forward play between here and the Olympics is blue sky. You know, there is a fortune to be made between here and the Olympics. A fortune. You know, we released a stage about 2.5 weeks ago and 10, 11 days, it was literally gone.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So, for example,
And
if
that's-
Daniel found you a site tomorrow, you'd look at it.
We would.
Touching back on what we were talking about off camera, this is a viewer question. I'm actually going to read the viewer question and then we can touch on other markets as well. So the viewer question, oh my gosh, he has nearly the same last name as me. His thoughts on, Mark Rolton's thoughts on Victoria, are investors leaving or a new property regarding the new property laws and tax laws?
The land tax.
Yeah, they are. Investors are definitely shifting out of Victoria. There is no secret about that, yes. I mean, you've got a $228 billion debt position as a state. You know, the current government of Victoria has introduced 34 new taxes since they've been in power. 34. There's only 128 taxes in Australia. So a quarter of them, they've just now reinvented and literally introduced a quarter of new taxes.
Thanks,
it's
Labor.
insane. It's wild. So, I mean, people are going to show their actions by the way they walk, the direction of their feet, right? They're going to look for a better opportunity. And it's really tragic. I mean, how do you go from being the state is the richest in the nation to being the poorest? That's 40 years of Labor's reign. The last coalition we had in Victoria was 1982.
What type of stock mark would you suggest for for residential investors? What type of stock or strategy would you suggest?
Look, that's a bit of a difficult one. You're trying to
Obviously,
paint,
everyone's so different.
You're trying to paint, one wall with one brush. I mean, that's not an easy task. The investor, are they sophisticated? How much money they got? How much capital? How much equity? How big's the portfolio? But look, grassroots, you would have to think that a detached home, a house and land pack on a block of dirt with nobody corporate in Australia would have to be the best place to start. Would I, Mark, go pick blue chip? Hell no. I encourage our clientele always target the lower socio-demographic. You want rent 52 weeks of 52. Like I can go get a unit in Tamarama, for 4.4, but I'm probably going to get about $2.5 a week in rent. And I'm going to get 39, 44 weeks out of 52. Maybe.
But with the
how do I
capital
cover that
growth?
shortfall? I want consistency. I want high growth suburbs that I can pull that equity in 18 months, 2 years and go again. I need to be able to make at least 80, 150 grand a year in capital growth to really get some speed, some velocity, right? It's not very hard to find them postcodes, mate. It's not very hard at all. There's so much data on this now. It's just readily available to all of us. So smart maneuvers aren't that difficult. Don't be attached to where you live. Be another suggestion. Oh, I live in Adelaide. I could never invest out of Adelaide. Oh, really? What's so compelling about your backyard? If I said to you, there's a box of gold, but it's in the next suburb, would you leave where you live to go get it? Well, of course. What's the difference in investing in property? So we've got these, boundaries, mental boundaries about where we invest to make money. I don't care. I don't discriminate.
Do you have a preference over modern newer build depreciation, high cash flow versus established value add growth?
Look, if it depends how you want to play. If you're happy to retire on, 250 grand a year of passive income, you might stick with the Reno flick or the Reno hold. If you're sort of talking about retiring on a couple of million worth of cash flow per year, you need scale. You must have scale. So how many Renos can you possibly pull off in a 12-month window? Maybe 1.5 at best. That's you working every weekend with the kids in tow. That's a hard slog. Versus if I get scale and I want $1 mil, $2, $3 mil worth of passive cash flow in my latter years that I'm not working for, I need scale. That's new. Let's just buy 2 or 3 a year, honey. Now that capital growth translates to 500,000 in that 12-month block. Let's go buy 2 more next year. Now we're on 5. Now we've got 5 that have all grown by 150 apiece. Now we've got 750 worth of equity. Let's go scale, go one of the 3. Now we're at 8. We've got 8 properties in 3 years. That's not unforeseeable. But clients that are doing that, why not? So it depends on how you want to play, how you enter. Make sense? What your objective is.
So you could make your cash flow through, or your capital for servicing through projects, then reinvest it into your brand new kind of bread and butter properties that will consistently grow that cash flow well.
Well, if you're going to take the path of being the developer, you don't develop projects, cash up, pay 32% corporate tax, and then go reinvest. You actually just retain and hold your stock because you're getting it wholesale, right? If I'm retailing a townhouse for 800, 900, it only costs me 660. So there's 250, 240 in it already.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I don't need to turn it over, pay tax
You'll retain it.
to achieve the same outcome. You retain, hold.
That's actually really insight. So it almost makes sense for me to be putting together my own deals to retain stock than it would be to be using my cash to buy deals.
Absolutely. It's much faster. Bit more risk, bit more to learn, understand, but you'll be better for it. As we mentioned before, the struggle is definitely worth the reward.
Interesting concept.
You'll be a far better investor for it.
Where would you start in terms of marketplaces?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
You're very granular now, aren't you? You're almost cheating.
Do you know what's funny? do you know what's funny, Mark? 5 years ago, before I became a proper buyer's agent, I actually went and letterbox dropped Newcastle. I'll get on Stash or to try and find the and I printed out letter 4.
There you go. Contact 4.
Contact 4. And I went and letterbox dropped 100 R3 zone properties that could potentially do a split.
Actually?
Yeah, swear to God.
Wow.
There you go.
Now I do things a bit different that I know what you like, but yeah, that was my first crack.
There you go.
And I said, one day I'm going to pull off a short or a long option.
Yeah, well done.
Haven't done it yet.
Well
What's
done.
your advice to us then? To Daniel, if he wants to do that and really crack it and get one of those deals?
Simple. Just do the work.
Do the work.
Just follow the system, man. 100 contacts a month. It's a numbers game.
It is a number.
You got sellers, vendors ringing you saying, what's this about?
Yeah.
It's R3. It's probably worth 1.2, 1.6. Offer them 1.82. Under option. I don't want to take possession of it. I don't want to own it. I don't want to tear 38 grand in stamp duty. I'll give you more, but I need the time. I need 15 months to pull off a DA. That's it.
Question. Daniel's a buyer's agent that does a lot of deals for investors and owner-occupiers. A lot. Do you think it would be a smarter move or not to instead try package up together? So he does a lot along the East Coast, a lot through the Central Coast and Newcastle, as you mentioned. Do you think it would be a smart idea, because I actually heard a buyer's agent do this a couple of weeks ago, for him to package up together, for example, a big land bank, sell it, package it up for 60 mil, option it, put it to a developer like yourself and sell it that way? Do you think he would do better time wise as well? Because you're not having to sell, 60 $1 million houses. You can sell 60 in one. Do you think that's a smarter move or no?
For you to earn cash.
For him, yeah.
To earn cash?
Yeah, make more money.
Right. No.
No.
No. If he develops the 60 keys under his own badge and sells them to the market, he'll make a killing. I mean, 60 would translate, even in Newcastle, would translate to about 15.4 million net.
What if it didn't have the income? Oh, well, that
Everybody's got capital for a good deal.
But
you keep forgetting.
Go for equity share in the deal.
That's what you're saying.
Oh, sorry, that's what. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Everyone's got money for a good deal.
Yeah.
We've all got this sort of mindset, Kevin, that, I don't have the capital, I haven't got the funding, my CRA's in tatters, I'd never be able to raise 5 million. If the deal's really lucrative and they're around, you got to learn how to tactfully work that deal through, work it up. But when you have a deal that's, a very profitable transaction, mate, the money is just there. Trust me, it comes out of the woodwork. You could ring 3 or 4 people now and say, listen, here's the transaction. Let me give you the high points. And you would have a lender on the hook within 24.
Do you think it's a smart decision to play that? Say, for example, we ended up getting a land bank deal, and we were throwing it at a developer. Let's say, for example, yourself. Do you think you would be offended if we went and shopped it around as well, not just to yourself?
The answer is probably, but you wouldn't tell me that.
Okay.
You'd be farming that against 3 or 4, 5 prospective buyers, and whoever comes forward first with the greatest offer, that's the one you take.
Okay.
But you'd cycle me up for the next round. You'd say, listen, unfortunately, Mark, you didn't get the deal, but I've got you in mind. You're the top of the list for the next one. That's all I ever did.
Got you.
And look, you don't need that many buyers. You'd be surprised. There's 1 million developers chasing opportunities today. They know that they can plug that into the ground. They'll make millions. It's no secret. It's a lucrative sport. But you don't need that many. You only need 4 or 5, 6 genuine developers that go, I've got the coin. Bring me the deal. Pretty easy. That's how I did it. I mean, seriously. You'd farm these deals around, didn't matter what it was, mini storage, townhouses, land estates. They're all looking to make money.
I can see your mind ticking, Daniel.
Yeah. I know. It's part of me was because there's two ways I can go to the property path or the audience podcast path. What's my passion? Like, you can't do both. Well, can you? Like, I couldn't be doing, or maybe, but in the yeah.
It's becoming almost counsel, isn't it? Like a life choice.
It is.
It is. Thank you.
You should be charging you guys.
But it's funny having this conversation because when I first started, it was to be projects develop. That was the path, and then things have evolved since.
Yeah, well, it really comes down to what you feel is the best possible scenario for your time. Be cautious. You want to do something you enjoy. Doesn't mean you won't have hard days, but something you naturally have an affinity to. You'll be better at it.
Thank you for this counselling session. Do you think we could outsource, for example, we want to grow the podcast business and obviously monetize it, but now we're also talking about other things that sound very good too. If we outsourced, do you think you could do both?
No.
Okay.
No, outsourcing's difficult because you're not learning the skills. You don't know what you're looking to discover. Gotcha. And how would you be able to then, translate that to somebody, that third party?
Gotcha.
Difficult.
Not even, for example, a masterclass, an online masterclass that you could sell online via the podcast. But
it's like a business plan starting to emerge, isn't it?
But you didn't have to actually spend the time to actually write it up. All the information is there.
So you're training people to go out there and find these deals as a masterclass?
No. We would still find the deal, but we would get someone else for the podcast to create our masterclass for us, and then sell it. Like, outsource that part of the podcasting part, the admin, the setting up.
I think you two will work it out. You're smart enough.
To circle back to a bit more of a thematic, something I would love to get your perspective on, Mark, is networking, the value of building a global network, not just commercially, because it's obviously going to create doors and create opportunities, but also from a personal standpoint, like increasing our quality of life by being able to travel overseas with a mate and do something cool, like go run across the desert, How have you been able to build your network, and what advice would you give to a 26-year-old looking to do the same?
Yeah, that's a very valuable proposition, to think that the circles we keep, I mean, obviously they harbour, great characteristics about ourselves. I mean, if you can invest yourself into circles that are only spiraling up, you're inevitably going to be better. So how would you do that? Create value in yourself, bring something to the table. A lot of our clients will say, well, how do I get across, the boardroom table from a CEO? Well, have something of value to share with that CEO. A good example, testament to this point, was I met a billionaire, not that long ago. I've had 14 or 15 billionaires that I've met over the time now. And this was an Aussie-based one, domiciled overseas, but he was in Australia, and he was looking at some opportunities. And so I went to pitch him. And interestingly, he runs 3 offices. 3 meeting rooms, my apologies. 3 meeting rooms at one time. And this guy's in his mid-80s. Okay, so he owns a stack of stuff in the US, ski resorts and things like that. And he'd run 3 meetings, planners, engineers, solicitors, in all 3 rooms. And he'd bounce between them. There was a door that operate. So you got about 6 or 7 minutes with this chap at best. And then he'd just wrap it up. It's either a deal or it's not. And he'd go to the next room. That was his style. He's mid-80s. Mate, presented immaculately. Like just sharp as the day is long. He was incredible, right? Never met him before. And I walked in and I had a deal. He was interested in buying it. He'd just purchased another significant holding from the state government right on the boundary. And he said, what do you do? And I said, this is how I operate. I work up deals, guys like you, public companies, etc. He goes, I haven't been in Australia for a couple of months. I haven't heard of you before. And I I got talking to his lawyer while I was waiting for him to enter the room, and his lawyer was equally as sharp, really good guy. And he walked in and he said, "So what do you do as a side hustle? I mean, you make money doing this, but where else are you spending it?" And I said, "Oh, I've got this parks business, this silly idea where you kind of get, people, they don't have a lot of money, but I said they can live in this house. They own the house, I own the land." And he looks at his lawyer and he goes, "Alex, are we in that space?" And he goes, "Well, no, we're not." He says, "Why the fuck aren't we doing this?" And it was so bizarre. And I looked at Alex, I was like, shit, in there, throw you on the bus. I looked back at him and he goes, "What are you doing for lunch?" I said, "I'm free." So we walked downstairs. It turns out the guy owns the whole city fucking block. Every high rise, every office tower, every restaurant, owns the lot. So we walk into lunch and his PA is sitting adjacent to us. And he's like, "Kelly, can you get me this? Kelly, can you get me that? Kelly, get me my normal lunch," And it was just something, having something of value. He's like, "So tell me how that land lease community stuff works." I said, "I've heard about it, but I don't know the intricacies." I explained the legislation. I said, "Well, you, me, we own the dirt. 6-7 hectares." I said, "They buy a box in a factory. It's cheap, kind of Henry Ford production style. 12 days, house is complete. They put it on the site. They pay you and I $225 a week for the rest of their lives, rest of the time." "Oh, right. How many of these houses can you get on a site?" I said, 300, 350. He looks back at Alex. He's at lunch and he goes, "It's 60 grand a week." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Right. We've got land everywhere." "Alex, how much land have we got for this stuff," right? I mean, having something of value. You ask the question, how do you network? Well, you try and crack open the doors as best you can. If you start building, IP, your knowledge, your acumen, then you have something in exchange. He was fascinated. He literally was fascinated. He'd been in property forever, right? All over the world. We hadn't really got the details of LLCs and how they worked. And so how does it all sort of operate? I said, "Well, we just have a management team on site. It's very, very simple." I said, "I'm not trying to make it, I'm not trying to over embellish it." I said, it's a very simple business and I love it." I said, "What I've stopped doing is selling the houses." He goes, "Why is that?" I said, "I buy the boxes and I put them on a site." And I said, "I just rent them to the free market." And I said, "The yields are going through the roof." He looks at me and he goes, "Be honest with me." He said, "What's the passing yield in that whole portfolio?" I said, 18.72% net.
18% net.
He looks at Alex and he goes, "We're fucking doing this." He said, "Would you consult to me?" It's just a conversation. It was all in 90 minutes. I said, "Of course. I'll help you out. No problem at all. I can help you get established." I said, "You're going to be my competition." A bit of a laugh and shit like that. I said, "You'll crush me, But that's how it started. I didn't consult to him, but he went and poached some pretty heavy hitters.
Is he your competition now?
He is, but on a very small scale. Yeah. Very small scale.
Do you get along with your competitors?
I try to. I think the cake is big enough. Rather than fighting over the slice, let's just make a bigger cake. You look at Australia's immigration issues. Look at our housing crisis. You can't tell me there's an opportunity here. Yeah. Who gives a shit about thinking small, right? Yeah. Seriously. He might be a competitor. He's got a hell of a lot more money. He's sort of 6-7 billion circa, right? He's got coin. But mate, there's so much opportunity.
That's what we realized when myself and Daniel went to the US a few months ago. You go there and it opens your mind up to the possibilities. So I understand when you were talking about America before and you're going, "Oh man, there's so many opportunities." Do you think it's, I know you say stay in your own lane, but how do you feel, again, this is just another business question, but business advice for us, but how do you feel about what if we did, for example, an American tour and we podcasted the best American agents? Do you think that would, even though we're an Australian-based podcast, do you think we have the leverage enough, or do you think that's a smart business play for us?
I think that's a terrific idea. Absolutely. Kick up some big names, some big brands, some shakers. You guys are the Aussie intruders, and all of a sudden you will get, I would think you would definitely get endorsements. You definitely get support. Yeah. For sure. They love Australians. But imagine what you'd take back. Imagine what you bring back to your agency, your audience here.
Would you do Dubai or America first?
Not at all. I don't see the reason. I mean, Dubai, you can buy a unit for 250,000 Aussie. It's not that competitive. There's only 3 million people in Dubai. There's 346 million in the US.
Got you.
That's the place you want to go.
Got you.
I mean, they lead Australia by what, 12, 15 years? Maybe more. That's where you need to be. If you can make it in the US, you can make it here. You can crush it here. Right?
Thank you.
I feel inspired.
Me too. This happened last time.
What Mark, what's been the biggest learning? Like what could you share from your journey? If you could give your 26-year-old self advice, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
Professionally.
Why not both?
Start with professionally. I would say be systematic in your movements.
Systematic.
Yeah, be very deliberate. You know, it took me a long while to work out that projects for me personally were profitable. This is the way forward. I would have been able to shorten that time frame. Would have gone from being a project manager straight to my own projects, and things would be very different today. But yeah, it took me a long while to sort of perhaps develop the ideas, the confidence. If I was looking at a 26-year-old perspective and had crosshairs on the wall, I'd probably say just go from project management, dive straight into development projects, and then, yeah, push hard on that. It took a while to get around to it.
How about personally?
You can ask that. I would say personally, be very conscious, very deliberate about how you pick a partner. That'd be my advice to my 26-year-old self.
Do you have any drawback with bringing your partner along the journey where you work alongside each other to build the dream?
I would never work with a partner. I would never work with a partner, no. If you want to maintain that level of polarity between you, you can't be business partners and then lovers. It just doesn't work. You really zap a lot of that spontaneity, that variety about you. You need to grow. Your partner needs to grow independently throughout the day on their own accord. That's been my learnings of other people around me. I've never worked with a partner, but certainly would not.
What about your advice for business partners?
Oh, I think you can foster a great relationship as business partners. And I think, you know, working closely together, you know, always be prepared though to play to your strengths. I don't see partnerships in commerce work well often. There's always someone pulling hard on the other. That's why I just don't do partnerships. But if I was to say what would be the markers that, you know, really sort of shine in a partnership that works well commercially, it'd be someone playing to their strengths and the other party doing the same thing.
Like a yin and yang?
Yeah, kind of. You know, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, and then run hard at that. Don't focus on the other person's weaknesses.
Gotcha.
Makes sense?
I really appreciate it, yeah.
I do appreciate that, yeah.
Yeah, capitalise on what you're good at. And then find someone else that can sort of fill in the blanks where you're weak. I don't want to be the master of all things. That takes way too long. I do what I'm good at, what makes money.
Thank you.
There's a red Lamborghini sitting on your front driveway. When you first picked up, not sitting in someone else's supercar, but when you picked up your first supercar, you got behind the wheel and you drove it out of, you know, wherever you bought it from. What was the feeling like?
That's a long time ago. Yeah, it was pretty special. Yes, I do recall that, yes.
Do you still have the same feeling?
No. Sadly. No. I think material things tend to be more like a drug. You need more of them.
Yeah.
So unless you can find a peace within you, you'll always be on that chase. Yeah.
How did you find your peace?
Something you and I mentioned before, being honourable to yourself, is establishing a really great connection with yourself and realising if I can be my best advocate, how far could I go? You know, how well could I fan the flames of success? Took a little while to work that out. But that's peace today.
Do you mind me asking, how small or big is your inner circle?
That's a good question. I'm very fortunate. My inner circle is actually quite broad, quite large. Yeah. Someone said a little while ago, and unfortunately he just recently took his own life. But he said to me a little while ago, one of the things I find remarkable about you is that you're very good at fostering friendships. You make it part of your habits. I went on a phone call one night, I didn't think much of it, and I went to his funeral last weekend, and it was surprising that circle is quite broad. But we all have very similar values, strangely. You know, family for me is the top. I don't care how good things may be, how fast that boat might be. I don't care how pretty she might be. Family comes first. So, oddly, we're all on that same, we hover around the same sort of things. You know, our prize, our trophy is kids and how good I am as a father and as a partner.
Yeah.
It's not an amount of money. So it's actually, quite extensive. And I really get a lot of joy out of, that circle. It doesn't take much for us to have a good time, you know. Couple of dirt bikes in the bush, a bottle of cognac and a box of cigars.
Sounds like a good time to me.
Mate, that's 4 days, no showers, love it.
Hell yeah.
Lost, out of fuel, cold, haven't eaten for 12 hours. That's bliss. And it's a Thursday night. Fuck,
That's
where are we?
awesome.
Don't know. Does it matter?
That's so
Nah.
cool.
And I really take I take a lot from that, a lot of joy from that.
That is cool.
Yeah. Or it can be, hanging out with a couple of mates and, having a beer after a surf, and there'll be 8 or 9 of us, 10 of us around a table, and just thinking how unique and special each one of those characters actually are. I know their story, I know their journey, I know their suffering, and what great men I'm surrounded by.
How do you foster a relationship like that? So let's say, for example, we want to become closer to a certain person because we feel like they're on the same level, vibe, or not the same level. They might be a lot higher, a lot lower, but on the same vibe as us. How do you start to foster a relationship like that without being weird?
Yeah, I get that. Adding value. What does that person need? Who are they? Who are they at their core? How can I benefit that person? How can I serve that person? I'm not talking slavery, but how can I support that person to help them achieve their best? That's what I often do, When you show up in order to give and not take is a simple way of saying it. You've had friends in the past that take and you're like, there's something about him or her, I just don't like them. Their vibe is off. But you have friends that always seem to give.
Yes.
How do I become more of that giving
Yes.
when I show up for somebody else?
Yes.
That delineates the two.
Mate, thank you very much for your time. I know how valuable your time must be. So I just want to say thank you for the inspiration you've given me on my journey. And I'm sure the inspiration that many others will get from this podcast. My last question for you, Mark, from all your journey until now, what's been the best question you've had to ask to propel you forward?
It'd start with, how can I be my best? Because when I show up, the answers show up. What kind of person, what kind of man do I need to be in this moment? Because, you can have shit going down. You can have 300 grand a month of lawyers' fees, projects going off the rails, your family melting down, your daughter sitting there screaming from the last argument you had with your partner. Who do I need to be in this moment? What's the best version of me now?
The best version of me now.
And then the answers seem to come.
Yep.
You rise to it.
Thanks, mate.
So thank you. Again, like Daniel said, thank you so much for the knowledge and advice you've passed along to both of us and obviously the audience as well. my last question for you is, let's say we've built up, like we're built. So we're both built, but financially everything's going well. But what would be your advice to improve this podcast? What do you think would make the guest experience better?
The guest experience, as in
yours,
my experience, better. I don't think there's any variation to what you're doing. I think the fact that you guys roll up in a very authentic way and are prepared to have those discussions in the way of, giving and serving your audience, I don't think you can refine it. I think you're onto something very good, very special and unique.
Thank you.
The experience is probably just sharing with you. I don't see how that can be bettered.
I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Awesome, fellas.